Have you ever sat on your bed, staring at the wall, wondering why you can't just get up and do it? The laundry piles up. The emails go unanswered. Even basic tasks feel like mountains. And the worst part? That voice in your head whispering, "You're just lazy." But what if I told you you're not lazy at all? What if your exhaustion isn't a flaw, but a message? You live in a society that worships productivity, where your worth is measured by how much you do, how fast you deliver, how little you rest. You were raised to believe that slowing down is weakness, and being constantly exhausted is a badge of honor. But your body, your mind, your soul, they know better. They know that something is wrong. You see, burnout doesn't happen because you're weak. It happens because you've been strong for too long, in a system that never lets you stop. You've been fighting battles no one sees, holding yourself together when the world expects performance, smiling when you're breaking inside. You're not lazy. You're carrying the invisible weight of chronic stress, emotional pressure, unprocessed pain, and expectations that no human being should be forced to meet. This is not your failure. This is not your shame. This is the first step toward freedom. Recognizing that your exhaustion is not a personal flaw. It's a rational response to an irrational world. And once you see that truth, something inside you begins to shift. I remember the day I hit a wall. It was a Tuesday, nothing special. I woke up, made coffee, opened my laptop, and just stared. There was no energy, no drive, just this heavy fog in my mind and a deep ache in my chest. I couldn't move, and all I kept thinking was, what is wrong with me? I scrolled through social media and watched others thriving, building businesses, hitting the gym, smiling with their morning routines. Meanwhile, I couldn't even answer a simple message. Then came the guilt, the shame, the crushing thought that I was falling behind in a race I never signed up for. But here's the truth no one told me. I wasn't lazy. I was in survival mode. Burnout doesn't always look like someone lying in bed all day. Sometimes it looks like high-functioning exhaustion, showing up, getting things done, and collapsing inside. You're expected to push through everything. Pain, grief, anxiety, trauma. None of it matters in a system that only values output. And when you can't keep up, they don't ask what happened to your soul. They call you lazy. They say you lack discipline. But maybe you're not undisciplined. Maybe you've just been disciplined into silence, into obedience, into running on empty. Maybe what you need isn't more motivation, but permission to stop, to feel, to heal. Because the truth is, you can't self-improve your way out of a society that's sick. You can only wake up and choose to no longer participate in your own burnout. There was a time when people were oppressed by others. Now, we've learned to oppress ourselves. Korean-German philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls it the burnout society. A world where no one needs to force you to work. You force yourself. You're not ruled by a boss with a whip. You're ruled by your own inner voice saying, do more, be better, hustle harder. It sounds empowering at first, like freedom. But it's not. It's self-exploitation. In this system, you're no longer a worker. You're an entrepreneur of yourself. Your body, a productivity machine, your mind, a to-do list, your identity, a brand, and rest? Rest is no longer seen as recovery. It's seen as laziness, as failure. You post your wins, you hide your breakdowns, you glorify the grind while quietly crumbling inside. That's how burnout thrives. It's not just about working too much. It's about never feeling like you're enough, no matter how much you do. Because in a burnout society, exhaustion isn't a red flag. It's a sign you're doing it right. And the more tired you are, the more praise you get. But here's the truth. You were never meant to live like this. You are not a machine. You are not a brand. You are not a productivity tool. You are a human being. And being is not something you need to earn. Burnout doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It hides behind, "I'm just tired." It shows up as irritability, brain fog, and that constant feeling of falling behind. Even when you're doing everything you can. You cancel plans. Not because you don't care, but because even small talk feels overwhelming. You wake up already drained. The thought of getting through another day feels like dragging a boulder up a mountain. And yet, you blame yourself. You tell yourself you're just being lazy. That if you had more discipline, more focus, more motivation, you'd be fine. But this isn't about discipline. This is about depletion. When your nervous system is in survival mode for too long, it starts shutting down parts of you just to keep going. Creativity? Gone. Joy? Faded. Curiosity? Numb. Even love feels like a chore. You're not thriving. You're managing. And barely. That's what burnout does. It turns aliveness into autopilot. You don't need a new planner. You don't need another productivity hack. You don't need to push harder. What you need is permission to feel, to admit, "I'm not okay." Because acknowledging your exhaustion isn't weakness. It's a radical act of honesty in a world that rewards emotional silence. The truth is, your burnout is not the problem. It's the alarm. And it's time to stop hitting snooze. How many times have you told yourself, "I can rest after I finish everything. I'll take a break once I've earned it. I don't deserve to relax. I haven't done enough." Where did that come from? Who taught you that you have to suffer before you can breathe? Somewhere along the way, we learned that rest is a reward, not a right. That love must be earned. That we are only valuable when we are useful. But that's not humanity. That's conditioning. You were not born thinking this way. You were trained to believe that your worth depends on your output. So now, when you're tired, you feel guilty. When you slow down, you feel ashamed. And when your body begs for stillness, you punish it with hustle. This is the sickness of the burnout society. It turns basic human needs into privileges. But here's the truth. You do not have to earn the right to rest. You are not a project to be completed. You are not a task to be optimized. You are not lazy for being tired. You are tired because you are human, and you've been running from yourself for too long. Maybe the most radical thing you can do is stop. Not because you finished your work, not because you hit your goals, but because you're already enough, exactly as you are. Let that truth sink in. Carl Rogers, one of the most compassionate minds in psychology, said something quietly revolutionary. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Let that settle in. In a world screaming at you to be better, faster, more. Rogers whispered, "You are already enough." He believed that every person has a deep, natural potential to grow, not through pressure or shame, but through acceptance. That means your healing doesn't begin when you fix yourself. It begins when you stop running from who you are. Think about it. How much of your energy goes into performing a version of yourself that feels acceptable to others? How often do you suppress your real feelings? Just to be liked, respected, or praised? You've been taught that your value comes from what you do. But Rogers reminds us, your value is in who you are. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not a failure. You are someone who has been pushed too hard, for too long, by a world that doesn't honor human limits. And now, maybe for the first time, you're being invited to let go, to stop proving, to stop pleasing, to simply be. Because the moment you accept yourself fully, not just the polished version, but the tired, confused, messy parts too, that's the moment real healing begins. And in that space of radical self-acceptance, something powerful happens. You remember who you were before the world told you who to be. In a world obsessed with speed, rest is an act of defiance. You've been conditioned to see rest as something you must earn. Something reserved for vacations, weekends, or after a long day of deserving it. But rest is not a prize. It's not a weakness. It's not a waste of time. Rest is a birthright. And in a burnout society, choosing to rest is a radical, almost rebellious act. It says, I refuse to treat myself like a machine. I refuse to measure my worth by my productivity. I refuse to sacrifice my well-being on the altar of performance. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't need a breakdown to justify slowing down. You can choose to rest simply because you exist. Because your nervous system is not built for constant stimulation. Because your body needs rhythm, not relentless motion. Because your soul is not here to hustle, it's here to live. We've normalized exhaustion. We've glorified busyness. We've forgotten what it feels like to be fully present in our own lives. But rest brings you back. It reconnects you to your breath, your body, your essence. It reminds you that you are more than your output. You are a living being, not a task list. So breathe, lay down, unplug. Not because you finished everything, but because you're allowed to exist without constantly proving you should. And that, in itself, is a quiet revolution. Burnout doesn't just drain your energy. It steals your ability to feel alive. You might go through the motions, but inside, there's a numbness, a disconnect from your own emotions, your relationships, and your purpose. The things that used to bring joy, a hobby, a conversation, a simple walk, now feel hollow. You're trapped in a fog where everything seems muted and distant. And that's the cruel trick burnout plays on you. It convinces you that you're broken beyond repair. You might hear voices, your own or others, telling you you don't care enough. You're not trying hard enough. You're failing at life. But none of that is true. You're not a failure. You're not uncaring. You're exhausted. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Your system is overwhelmed, so it shuts down parts of you to survive. And when your heart goes quiet, loneliness grows louder. But here's the hopeful truth. Even the deepest numbness can thaw. Even the heaviest fog can lift. You don't have to stay disconnected. You can find your way back to feeling, to connection, to meaning, to joy. One small step, one moment of kindness toward yourself at a time. Because healing from burnout isn't about giant leaps. It's about gentle, patient return. Back to yourself. In a world that demands perfection and strength, vulnerability is often mistaken for weakness. But vulnerability is the gateway to healing. When you allow yourself to be seen, your tiredness, your fears, your cracks, you start to break the cycle of isolation burnout creates. You don't have to pretend you're fine. You don't have to hide behind a mask of competence. Acceptance means saying, "This is where I am. This is how I feel." It's not resignation. It's courage. The courage to be honest with yourself and with those around you. When you embrace vulnerability, you invite connection with yourself and with others. And connection heals. You begin to rebuild trust in your own body and mind. You learn to listen to your needs instead of ignoring them. You start to treat yourself with the kindness you've been denying for so long. Burnout thrives in silence and shame. But vulnerability shines a light into the darkness. It's the first step toward reclaiming your life. If you've made it this far, know this. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not failing. You are a human being who has been pushed too far, for too long, by a world that glorifies burnout and exhaustion. But inside you, there is a spark that refuses to be extinguished. This spark is your true self, beyond productivity, beyond guilt, beyond the pressure to perform. It's time to nurture that spark, to protect it fiercely, because the revolution doesn't happen outside of you. It starts within. Choosing rest, choosing self-compassion, choosing to honor your limits. You are reclaiming your life, your peace, your joy. So breathe deep, let go of the shame, and remember, you are enough, just as you are, and that truth is the most radical act of all.